Well, welcome everyone to another part of our Lean Six Sigma series. This time we're going to talk in this episode about the word improve. Remember, we're looking at DMAIC, define, measure, analyze, improve today, and control. And then we'll finish the series up with a topic on, basic tools as to what we have. So what we're looking at today is the whole idea of improve. So we've defined the process. We've measured and analyzed some of it. Now we're looking at what do we do to improve it. So what we're talking about, or improve, implement, move forward with. So what we're talking about is reducing waste, complexity, and then hopefully what we're going to do is we're going to identify something called a pilot, or through a pilot test or a pilot study. So as we think about the PDSA deployment platform, the do part is to actually do something about looking toward improving. So we've identified, or we're developing, our potential solutions in the improve stage. We want to evaluate, select, and then optimize the best of the solutions. And then maybe develop a future value stream map if we've used that tool. And then a key on this is to develop and implement a pilot solution, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. And then develop and execute a full-scale implementation plan is our ultimate goal from the improve stage. As you go through that analyze phase and looking at the improvement things, there are certain bottlenecks, barriers, or gaps that are there, including the patient themselves, the supplies, the staffing, the equipment, the space available, all those kinds of things. So as you're looking at the improve stage, we're looking at what can we do to improve or remove those bottlenecks, barriers, or gaps, and how we might go forward. I commented on the idea of pilot testing, and this really becomes real critical, not only in the DMAIC model, but certainly in the PDSA model, where what we want to do is identify those problems and solutions. And we've come up together through our team with an ideal solution. And so rather than say, let's roll it out across the entire practice, we might actually look at it with one of the locations, one of the doctors, one of the payers, just one set of staff, one day of the week, depending on what goes on. But what we want to look at is to identify a small component part of our organization that gives us an opportunity to test what we've actually done, or not what we've done, because we haven't done it yet, but to look at what we've actually come up with as a proposed solution. So how do we go about pilot testing? Well, you got to make that plan as to where you're going to do and how long and who's going to be involved. You probably are going to have to come up with some kind of a design phase in terms of what you would do to implement it overall through the practice. So your policies and procedures, your training options, and that sort of thing would be key in terms of kind of putting this modeling together. Finalize the concept and then do it. And once you've done it, then obviously you evaluate it to make sure that in fact it meets the expectations that you had, or you make the changes or revisions that are necessary to continue to be able to improve it. And then once this is done, we move out into the entire practice. Now, as we think this through, the idea of pulling through the system is really important. And that is when you check the patient in, the medical assistant needs to be alerted, or the triage team needs to be alerted that the patient is ready, so that the triage team then pulls the patient into the triage area, then from the triage area to the provider, and so on. And there's the barriers that we face are when patients have to wait a long time in any one of the steps along the way, or your process of coding and or hiring people, depending on what it is. What you want to do is you want to make sure that the next step is ready to receive the input from the prior step as you go through. So your process lead time, your process cycle efficiency, those kinds of things are going to be really critical to help you look at those barriers. Another concept is called WIP, or work in process. And that means how many patients are actually in the queue waiting to be seen, or how many coding efforts, coding scenarios are waiting to be taken care of, different kinds of things like that. So the idea in the workflow system is to pull the work through the process rather than have it constantly, each step pushing to the next step, trying to get the next step ready or to be available to do that. So avoiding interruptions, being organized and so on is really important. And what I like to think about is about 80% of the time, the pull system is going to work. And that means that it's ready to go, 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 go. But about 20% of the time, there's going to be the exception. So that patient that requires a longer time visit than what was anticipated, a complexity in terms of a coding situation that needed to have additional review because it was bundled, it was unbundled or whatever. But the idea is that roughly 80% or better of the incidents that occur in any process are going to be in the pull mode and probably 20% in the push mode. So what we want to do is we want to try to eliminate those that 20% and reduce that 20% into hopefully 3, 4, 5%. So there's always going to be an exception. But if those exceptions can be narrowed down because we've done so well in other parts of what happens, I think it's really important. So knowing that and communicating between the steps along the way so that everybody knows what is the trigger point to get that step to be able to move forward and how do we go about it. So you can use electronic notifications, you can use observations, you can use those room markers, different color flags and so on. So there's lots of different ways that you can make sure that you're communicating effectively as to where we want to go. So any way we can pull the work in is great. And, saving the work for the end of the day, which I know a lot of physicians do, rather than dictate or complete the patient experience at the time of visit, means that it's kind of batched together. And when it's batched together, you end up having to rework, you end up having to do a lot of other things. So as you think about your work, try to think about it in terms of finishing what you have in your hand, finishing what you're focusing on and moving on to the next thing, rather than piling it up and ending up having to do it in a batch work routine. And one of the simple tools, and I know we're going to talk about tools a little bit more in the final of our educational episodes here, but one of the simple tools is to think about your work area and do what's called the 5S. And the 5S is just simply following a sequence. Sort out what is needed in your work area, set it in order so it's always neat and kept in its place. Shine, keep the area clean, standardize, always do the same thing, and then sustain it. So if you think about an exam room, if you had an exam room that was set up, each exam room is set up exactly the same. So it's sorted out, it's set in order, it's kept neat and clean, it's all standardized. So each exam room is exactly the same. And then you work to sustain it. So after every patient, after every day, the beginning of the next day, whatever it is, you clean it up so you make sure that you're going through this 5S model. So when we think about this, then the improved deliverables are the improvement plan itself. So hopefully we got that on a quality perspective so that we're looking at in terms of how we might move, how we might go forward. We want to make sure that we're documenting everything. So our top policies and procedures, our testing model, our education and training model, all of those kinds of things are in place. And that what we have as an outcome is a stable and predictable process that meets the customer's expectations. And that's going to be really critical for us as we think this through. So what's the improve stage? The improve stage is basically coming together as a team, taking all that data that you've gathered in the measure, all that information that you've put together and thought about and analyzed stage, come up with an improvement strategy. You've tested it out with the pilot tests, and then you're ready to go ahead and implement it through the entire organization. So again, thank you for listening today to this session, and we'll look forward to hearing, seeing, and identifying what again is probably one of the more critical stages that we don't do a real good job on, and that's control. And that'll come up next as we go forward with what we're about. So I want to thank you for your time and hope you're enjoying this. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me at odahl@odahlconsulting.com. If you have any questions, comments, I'd be happy to answer them for you. So have a great day. Thanks.